This research investigates the 1995 U.S. intervention into the Bosnian War. After a culmination of ineffective economic sanctions, failed UN interference, persistent and brutal imagery on the news, and ongoing genocidal violence and war crimes, the U.S. finally decided to intervene in Bosnia in the summer of 1995. With this clear background established, however, essential questions remain about the precise reasons for U.S. involvement beyond just humanitarianism, and several explanatory theories arise from evidence-based inquiry. This research has determined that the three most prominent and compelling theories for why the U.S. intervened are as follows. The first involves geopolitical interests, which looked like an attempt to ensure geopolitical and national security by gaining relative power over the Europeans during peace talks, enforcing Bush's so-called New World Order, and halting the spread of war to the rest of Europe. The second is one of domestic influences, specifically to satisfy domestic political pressures and potentially to advantage Clinton in the next election, but also involving the role of the media and the so-called CNN effect of the brand new 24-hour news cycle. And the third and the last is the most conventionally held, which is a theory of humanitarianism and protection of human rights, and which this research has separated further into U.S. public opinion and the scholar Martha Finnemore's New Age norms of humanitarian intervention. In conducting research and utilizing process tracing methodology, this work has served as a theory testing exercise that examines each of these explanations in turn, with the ultimate goal of presenting a sense of truly informed clarity regarding the U.S. motives for intervening in Bosnia in 1995. Regarding geopolitical interests, it can be seen that an American bid for relative gains over Europe is exaggerated and truly extreme realpolitik. There are just too many gaps in the logic to be able to fully support that the U.S. worked to undermine long-standing European allies in order to get the upper hand in peace talks. And while there are some interesting parallels between stated U.S. security objectives in Europe at the time and diplomacy goals in Bosnia, the theory does not hold water. However, anxiety over credibility and the reputation of NATO, if the conflict, which came right at the heels at the end of the Cold War, spiraled out of control, were present, and this did influence U.S. decision-making. This is specifically seen in the desire to bolster a superpower, self and international image, and the vision of a new world order of prosperity which was left over from the Bush era still. But at the end, ultimately, concern over the war spreading and threatening stability, which hence would threaten U.S. interests in the rest of Europe, is the most explanatory facet of this theory and should be treated as such. With regard to domestic influences, public opinion polls, the upcoming election cycle, and media imagery of all the brutality happening were directly influencing Clinton's choice to intervene. While some issues with correlational directionality and the validity of the so-called CNN effect remain, this theory does answer the when component by citing a shift in popular thought and Clinton's presidential reputation and aspirations as a reason for why the U.S. chose to intervene in August of 1995. Finally, humanitarian motives as a cause for intervention are strongly supported by the fact that American popular support for humanitarian intervention in Bosnia was really cemented after the ethnic cleansing was discovered. And this was especially linked to the public opinion's polls and how this had an influence on Clinton's Bosnia stance, which is exceptionally compelling. And ultimately, through evaluating all of these theories and the corresponding evidence and utilizing process tracing methodology, this research has striven to clarify the rationale behind this intervention. It is so essential to truly emphasize the power of analytical tools for everyday public to be able to understand U.S. foreign policy and create a more accountable, transparent, and straightforward democracy.